Hello, welcome to Chapter 3 Podcast, the show for readers of science fiction, fantasy, and romance. This is Season 2, Episode 17. Today, me and Leanna are back to continue our read-along of the First Law books with Best Served Cold by Joe Abercrombie. Very exciting. I'm finally reading something I haven't read before, although, Leanna, I know you have read this before. And
yes, but this is our first chat about a book that isn't a reread for you.
It's true. It is. So new and exciting. I really liked this.
This was originally my favorite before the new trilogy was a thing, and before I reread it. But it was my first time through my favorite.
I can see that. I really enjoyed it. I liked a lot of the characters. I think his character work is great, and it's very different from the First Law trilogy. And I know part of this is
not very different, but it's indifferent in certain key aspects. But I mean, like, it is still very similar.
But the pacing of it is very different, I guess.
But just like when you say it's very different, I mean, there is still a lot about it that is quite similar. So it's not like a totally different project.
No.
Just like
it's the same. Yeah. Like structurally, it's different in terms of like pacing and stuff and like what the book is trying to accomplish, but the world and the way he approaches characters and stuff like that is
like, it feels similar. Like a First Law book. Like, when you read the trilogy and read this, you're like, yes, this is what comes next.
Yes, like, yes, it is definitely a logical continuation. But it was something where I told you this, I started off listening to the audiobook and I was like, I cannot just I read the book physically along with the audiobook because things were just happening so quickly. I wasn't catching everything just listening to it.
I mean, this is my third time through and I still caught things like that I didn't catch the first or second time.
There's a lot that happens. I mean, it's
plus also like
book,
this is
but
again
also
like all the times that I say to read in order because of all the little stuff that he includes that you only pick up on. But there's like, just generally speaking, even when it's not necessarily a reference to another First Law thing, he also just generally likes to cram in a bunch of little stuff that isn't even necessarily meaningful. Like when I say I caught things, it's not like I didn't understand the plot and now I finally get it. It's like just like a bunch of like little stuff that's around, and it's not an Easter egg in the like Marvel Brandon Sanderson sense. Like it's not gimmicky like that. It's more just like these little moments where like something happens that like if you catch it, you catch it, and if you didn't, you didn't. But it's there, and if you like, it's a joy. If you do stumble on it.
Well, there's just so much detail and nuance that's there if you want to see it, and I mean, this is my first time reading it. I'm sure I didn't pick up on everything, but there were a lot of really interesting things.
I got this. This is not the thing I messaged you about, that this is the thing that I was the most excited about. Was that I caught for the first time. I mean, he always likes to name the books and name the title or the chapters after like famous quotes or after he's referencing things all the time. So, like the blade itself is from the quote, "The blade itself incites to deeds of violence." Before they are hanged is from the quote, we should forgive our enemies, but not before they are hanged. And the last argument of Kings, that's not a quote, but it is what King Louis I don't know the number, it's for the 13th that he had that like engraved on his cannons for war, meaning that this is the last argument of Kings.
Interesting.
Like, war. So like he's always doing that. And so like the chapter titles are often also, they sometimes even have like, he'll actually have a quote as the start of it. That's not like a First Law quote. It's a real world. Like Terry Pratchett is one of the authors that's quoted in the new trilogy. So the titles of chapters are sometimes a First Law reference. It's just like something that makes sense for the chapter. And sometimes it's a reference again. So like I did not catch the first two times I read it, and I only caught it this time, that one of the chapters is called "Thus the Whirligig." And that's a reference to Twelfth Night by William Shakespeare because at the end of Twelfth Night, mild spoilers for 12th Night, Malvolio is like, he's kind of an asshole, and there's some of the comedic beats are about playing a prank on him to get back at him, and now it's all coming to light how he was pranked, and it's all being explained what happened and who did it and why. And one of the characters says, "Thus the whirligig of time brings forth his revengers." So like,
interesting. That's great. I love it. Well, I noticed in Best Served Cold, because it's divided, and we should do a quick sort of overview of like what is this book. But I did notice.
Well, my little quote, it should be a clue. It's a revenge story.
That's I mean,
it's a revenge.
It is. Well, in Best Served Cold, I think the title is also pretty obvious,
which is also a quote. Revenge is
Best Served Cold. Yeah. So it's interesting because it's divided up into 7 parts for each of the 7 people she wants to kill to get revenge. And I did notice that there was a quote at the beginning of each part which was kind of interesting.
Yeah, he's a well-read man. He likes to put in stuff.
Yep. Yeah, no, this was much more fast-paced than the First Law series. Like,
it's like all the action
nonstop.
of the First Law trilogy crammed into one standalone.
Yes. Sometimes, like, there were moments where I felt like the action scenes were too long, the battle scenes, but it's a personal preference thing.
I mean, I
this
think
was not my favorite.
you felt that way about stuff
I
in the
felt
First
that
Law
way about,
trilogy.
yeah, I did. I definitely did. But overall, I had a really good time with it, and I love the characters, and the political pieces of it are so interesting. And some of the revelations and scenes are just like,
I mean, it does,
gosh.
it rewards you for paying attention, because like if you're halfway through and you're like, I don't know what's happening, well, you're not going to be enjoying it. But if you are
Right.
paying attention and you did catch all the things and how they're connected and who's who and what all the little things they've said to each other before that are now callbacks to that, like if you actually paid attention, then the scene is like so great.
Yeah.
Or you're just like, I don't know what's happening or who any of you are or why we're here. Those are the only really two options.
I mean, I think that's fair. Yeah. I do think that for people who, well, and this is maybe true for Abercrombie in general, but I think for people who need their characters to be good.
Well, I think reading if you still after the First Law trilogy were still hoping to find
Right.
that, I was like, I mean, that's your fault. You're still looking for that.
Yeah. No, well, but I mean, I think it's interesting, right? Because this is a revenge story, and like, none of the characters are heroic. A lot of times they're doing things for like selfish reasons. And
although that is the thing about revenge stories is that like revenge itself, as satisfying as it is, and therefore as it's a thing that people gravitate towards. Like revenge stories like stand the test of time because people just like they love to see it. But any revenge story kind of necessitates your protagonist choosing the dark path and choosing to come down to the level of their enemy and do the same in return. And this, like, I mean, in this case, she was bad to begin with. But I mean, like any revenge story, even if they start out virtuous, Count 'em Monte Cristo, they cannot be virtuous by the end if they have chosen revenge.
Mm. What I think is so interesting about this, I don't know if I can say this right now because it's spoilery though.
You can hint at it and I'll probably know what you're talking about.
I feel like I'm gonna forget. Okay. So one thing that I really like about this is that Monza, who's our main character, the woman
Monscaro Mercato, the snake of talons.
Right. Who's
I have to say,
revenge.
between the two different Monzas on the covers, I know that like people listening and not watching won't see, but like the new Monza is very boring looking compared to the old cover Monza. Old cover Monza looks way more metal.
That is true. I just don't like that cover design.
Really? I love it.
Really. Yeah, I don't know. I don't love these covers either, to be honest.
I mean, I think my favorites are the UK paperbacks where like the cover of Best Served Cold for that is just like, it's kind of like this side here that has like coins and stuff and without Monza, and that has like a blade on it, and that's it. There's no people on it because they don't have people on any of the covers.
Interesting.
But I just think that for having a person on the cover, this works way better for me than the new cover.
I like her. I just don't like the whole cover design. You know what I mean?
I just like this better than the new US paperback.
I hear you. Yeah.
And it's, I just have to have a hardcover because I have to.
That's fair. I think it's interesting because Monza is seeking revenge, and it's not necessarily quite as satisfying as she wants it to be, right?
Even from like the very beginning, like she begins to find when she starts to actually get some returns on this plan that she's like, I want to enjoy this really bad, but I'm just gonna fake it till I make it.
Yeah.
Hopefully this starts feeling good at some point.
Yeah. What I think is interesting though is that it's not this, because I have seen, so like you have your classic revenge story, right? Where it's like, okay, somebody gets revenge and it's satisfying, perhaps. Or you have a story where like someone gets revenge, it's not satisfying, and it ruins their life, or like they somehow realize at the end.
They realize that like they ruined their own life by pursuing revenge.
Exactly. Yeah. This book doesn't do either of those things, which is so interesting. It's like, we're not gonna moralize about it. You are gonna see that maybe it's not satisfying.
All of the characters do constantly moralize about what they're doing.
They do. Yeah.
The book itself, its thesis isn't to moralize, but the characters themselves, which I think is generally Abercrombie's thesis, is that when people, and if people justify and moralize their own behavior to themselves.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I liked Monza a lot. I
And I
think
mean,
she's
even
such
though
an
it
interesting
is,
character.
she's obviously the person on the cover. It's her book,
Yeah,
but it is more of an ensemble cast,
it
even
is.
though
Yes.
it's her revenge. But
Yeah, but it's like her collecting people to help her enact her revenge. And like there are some characters that she ends up with.
you think after a while that like when you've seen Abercrombie invent such unique characters, and you're
Mhm.
like, how much material can you possibly still have to generate yet a new individual unique person?
Yeah.
And he keeps doing it. Like
Yeah.
up to like the new trilogy, I'm like, you still got it. I don't know where these people are coming from. Like you must have like multiple personality disorder.
Well, I mean, but like people are like that, which I think is what makes it so interesting is that I don't know. I like the way he does characters. The
It's
Poisoner,
impressive.
it is impressive. It
Because like
is.
to split your psyche to be able to write all those characters and to
Mhm.
write from their perspectives, and
Mhm.
because they're not just like out over there doing something funny, like you're in all of their heads all the time.
Yeah.
So like he has to actually write in the headspace of how this person is thinking
Uh-huh.
and write it in a way where you buy it.
Yeah.
And so he has to like fracture his psyche into so many pieces across the first law to give us, and especially, I mean, we're not there yet, but the heroes is even more characters, and you
Mhm.
see them even more briefly. Like there are so many characters in the heroes, and you'll see a character for like some you see longer, some you see for like 2 seconds, but even the ones you see for 2 seconds, you're like, that felt like a person who has a life off the page that
Mhm.
came before this, what I saw. And if they didn't die in this scene, then they have something that comes after. But like, like to do that just like for everybody, all the no one's a cardboard cutout, like
Mhm.
ever. It's
Yep.
just staggering.
Yeah. And I think there were a lot of really great, interesting characters in this book. I have to say I was so entertained often by the Poisoner.
Reverin Day.
Yes. Well, he's such
Well,
a
talking about moralizing, he's always like justifying his own positions and
yes,
actions.
but it's so funny because sometimes he thinks that he's so good at what he does. But
And in fairness to him, he is pretty good at what he
he's
does.
pretty good at what he does, but he also has some like royal screw ups. And sometimes his biggest successes are like
Happy
accidental.
accidents. Well, there's even that like kind of I guess mild spoilers for like a character beat, but like he says there's no such thing as happy accidents.
Mm,
And then later he starts cackling because something went not exactly according to plan, but then it kind of just like worked out in
yeah.
a way, and starts laughing because he's like, I guess there is such
I
a
guess
thing as
there
a
is such a
happy
thing as a
accident.
happy accident. He was something else. And Costa was also just so
Well,
entertaining.
I always
And
refer to him as the Jack Sparrow of the First Law universe.
yes. Yes. 100%. That is
I mean, a lot of his
so
lines you could
accurate.
picture Jack Sparrow
Yeah.
saying.
Yeah. No, that's completely accurate. And he had some things that surprised me.
And it's nice too, because I
It
mean,
was fun.
like, you do have some familiar faces to anchor you in this
Mhm.
new story in a new place with new stakes and a new situation. But
Yep.
you have people like Nicomo Casca who are
Mhm.
like, okay, I know who you are. We saw some of you in the First Law trilogy, and we get to see so much more of him, which is great. 'Cause unlike Jack Sparrow, I mean, it's not like Casca's the main character, which is why it still works. There should never be a book where Casca's the main character, just like there shouldn't have been a film where Jack Sparrow was the main character. Like that's not the function of that character. But like, having seen more of him, like giving more screen time, if you will, to that role was like, oh, like he's kind of like a comic relief in the
Yeah.
First Law trilogy. Like he's got some great one-liners that are quite, quotable, but he's not really a full-on character that you're like, what's his deal? But you really
Mhm.
kind of get to know him and what makes him tick, and like he's not just like a caricature that like stumbles
Mhm.
on screen to say a funny thing. Like he actually, like, as a human, you like get him and like
Yep.
why he is the way he is.
Yep. It's really interesting. There's so many things that happen towards the end of the book that I was like, "What?"
And again, like it's just like it's in a lot of the details where I feel like that's why Abercrombie's characters feel so people-y, like they feel like
Mhm.
authentic humans, because like it's easy to write, the wild card character that, or
Mhm.
maybe I shouldn't say easy, but like, plenty of people can write a wild card character that, even if it's a good enough writer, can have some quippy, witty things to say that are memorable and
Mhm.
fun to have around. But like Casca's behavior at every turn, especially when you come to learn more about him, it's never out of character. And like
Right.
when you learn, how can like it almost feels like a comedy beat. It feels like a caricature to have somebody who's like casual and snarky, almost like a Marvel character in the face of violence. And you're like,
Mhm.
who's actually in the face of violence going to be quippy? But it is actually entirely believable that Casca is, because he gets really stressed out and drunk by being in peacetime. And it's only in like when he's faced with imminent death that he like gets his shit together and is like, well, this is living. I am sharp and I am ready. And this is where I'm my best, when I'm like about to die. As soon as you take danger away from him, he's like, I can't function. I don't know how to live. And like, there are people like that.
There are people like that.
He's like a quippy Bond villain who's just like, you know, laughing in the face of a gun. Like, that's literally part of his like psyche.
Yeah, no, 100%. And I mean, you do know people like that, which I just think across the board, that's true. I think part of what, you know, going back to Monza makes her so interesting is that she is definitely what she needs to be to succeed in her chosen career as a woman. And I think what's interesting about her is that we see how like she has to live up to certain things, even if it's not really how she feels, and how she just kind of like.
Well, I think one of the most interesting ways that he executes Monza's characterization is by having us learn who she is by how she misrepresents herself to herself. And that's who you think she is because you only have her word to go off of. And then by the end of the book, you've had enough other people challenge her own assessment of herself, challenge her own position on who she is, challenge her belief on what makes her tick, to where by the end of the book, you're like, oh, Monza, you're actually full of shit. You're nothing like what you told me you are.
Yeah. But she is single-minded and determined to be who she thinks she needs to be regardless.
Yeah. But and there's also the sense of like, because you get, and this is another example of like the book uses flashbacks sparingly, but to great effect. There aren't just like lengthy pages, hundreds of pages of flashbacks just to like, you know, pad the runtime. You have like some of the flashbacks are like so short. It's literally just the one conversation because that was the key conversation that you needed to learn about to give you context for what's going on. And so,
but they give you so much information about her and her brother, particularly. Well,
that's what I'm saying. Like, there's when people complain about flashbacks feeling like they drag the runtime of a book or a movie, but there's a reason flashbacks exist, and like this is them used correctly, like with surgical precision. Come in, show you the key thing, and we're back to the main story. And we didn't just like go in a flashback so long that we forgot what we were doing here. But what I was going to say about the flashbacks is that it's in the flashbacks that even though they are quite short and used sparingly, the flashbacks still give you this sense of the kind of slow death of 1,000 cuts, the 1,000 steps that took her down the path of where she is now, that she didn't start out there. It kind of like flashes back to each pivotal forking of your life that like takes you further down that path. And so it's like those key moments where like something changed in her life that irrevocably pushed her farther down this path.
Right. Well, and I think the other piece of it is that at the beginning of the book, we come into the story seeing these people kill her brother and try to kill her, right? And so understand
spoilers for like page 2.
For page 2, yeah.
Like it opens with a bang.
It does. So, it's understandable that she would want revenge. But I think what's interesting is with the flashbacks, you also get these moments that build out who her brother is, because he is barely there in the current plot because he's dead. But
that can take you out of a story.
Unfortunately.
In fact, I think it's in Better Cold that Casca has a line that he attributes to something that someone once told him that was like, they say that you should laugh at every opportunity you have while you're alive because you'll find it decidedly difficult afterwards. Because I think someone's asking Casca how he can be laughing, and he's like, you have to laugh while you're alive. You can't
accurate
after.
I mean, what are you gonna accurate. No, but it's interesting because her brother Benna, you don't know much about him. You know that she wants revenge and they were really close to each other. But
Benna is like the wife that was fridged. He's like there to set her on her revenge quest.
Right. Except that the more you learn about him, the more you're like, were you deserving of her doing all of this to get revenge for your death? Maybe not.
Probably not.
Yeah.
But I mean, she's quite, and again, just like the way that who she is gets challenged by characters. So by the end, you're like, oh, the impression you gave me of who you are is not true. But similarly, she's quite righteous about this revenge, that she's like 100% all in. This was wrong. It must be righted. There is no gray. And like the number of people that are like, are you kidding me? The number of things you've done, with the crap you've pulled, with the people that you've backstabbed, where do you get off? And she's always like, okay, but this person, I didn't wrong them. And they stabbed me in the back. So there.
It's true. I mean, like, a lot of bodies drop in this book.
Which, in fairness, she's like, this is not exactly what my plan was. This is
No.
more collateral damage than I intended. But nevertheless, we
Sometimes
must carry on.
yeah, the show must go on.
Let's crack on to the next person we must murder.
Indeed, indeed. One question that I have, because I can't decide, and you've read this more than I have. Do you think that she actually had a
Are we getting into spoilers? Because I think I know what you're going to ask.
Okay, we'll say we're getting into spoilers. I don't know if this is, like, super spoilery, but, like, kind of. I mean,
It's
yeah.
pretty spoilery if it
guess
is what I
so.
think you're going to say.
Okay. Do you think that she actually had an incestuous relationship with her brother?
Yes.
Okay.
Absolutely. Because I've said before why this one, it's still a great book and I enjoyed it every time I read it. But where the first Law trilogy is more that like every time you read it, it gets better. This one, it's a revenge story where the ending doesn't really subvert or alter the road there. You know, the end of the first Law trilogy, you're like, oh, I need to go back and reread and see everything that I didn't know that to look for before.
Yeah.
But this story, I mean, like, okay, we set out to do revenge and then we do the revenge. And then that's it. So like seeing the end of the story, there's some things that, you know, it's interesting to see where, okay, let's go back and see how we got there. But it's not really the kind of story, like the rereading of the joy of it is more just like the little things that you missed simply because it was your first time through, not because the ending made it possible to notice it. It's just that like you can't possibly catch it all the first time. Just the amount. It's not that like, it's not like, again, the first Law trilogy, you're like, I didn't know to look for this. I didn't know this was a thing or an option.
Right.
Whereas this is like, it just the more you read it, they're like, oh, I didn't notice the first time that you like did that thing over there.
Yeah.
But the one thing that you kind of on a reread now have that you didn't have the first time through is that is like knowing to look for all the times that her relationship with her brother gets mentioned and how she thinks about it and how she talks about it. And the number of times she links Shivers to her brother in her mind and then does it in order to find Shivers attractive and does it to when she no longer finds him attractive.
Oh.
So, like, I think it's pretty indisputable.
Ugh. Okay. Lovely. I was like, I can't tell. I was like, I know everybody else thinks this, and he was clearly telling other people it was the case, but, like, is it or not? I don't know.
And I mean, when Shivers asks her about it, if it wasn't true, I think she would deny it.
Yeah.
And she's like, it's none of your business, which is not what you say if it's not true.
Yeah. Ugh. Why?
Because why not?
So gross.
Because she'd be such a great and virtuous character if not for that.
No, but it's but it's still, it's just kinda...
Which, like, I didn't say it before because we weren't in spoilers, but when I said Benna is the wife that got fridged, I mean, like, low-key, he was the wife that got fridged.
Yeah. He was also terrible. It's like he went behind her back and did all this stuff and pushed her into dangerous situations and did dumb shit and, like, could not get his act together, and she was always having to protect him and take care of him. Like,
I mean, basically, like, the work of the book is to, like, deconstruct Monza's worldview and her own view of herself. Like, you open the book by her self-righteously saying that she's been wronged, that she is a beast and a monster, and that she is the hardened one, that her brother was, like, you know, her bestie, and that he deserves to be revenged, and that he was so wonderful. Yeah. And so then across the course of this book, you're like, okay, so revenge is not justified because you've done far worse to people in your life. So, like, where do you get off? But at the same time, you aren't as bad as you think you are. You're not nearly as hard, and you're not nearly as cruel and vindictive as you pretend to be. And your brother is not deserving of this. So, like, on all three counts, it is in fact the opposite.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's interesting too, because it's like, she's not necessarily getting a lot of satisfaction out of most of her revenge, but she still ends up as a duchess at the end of everything.
Which, like, wasn't the plan. She wasn't trying to ascend.
No.
Yeah.
Well, but what's funny is it's probably what her brother wanted for her.
Well, I mean, kind of it was in the end. Like, they went the long way down the road that Benna wanted to go on. He was like, you deserve to be in charge. You deserve to be a duchess. You deserve to blah, 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 blah. By getting revenge for his death, she ended up, I guess, giving him the best revenge that he could ask for by landing on top where he felt he deserves to be.
I guess so. Yeah. I do think it's interesting too, because, and I think we've talked about this in the first Law trilogy as well, that he does this thing of, like, having characters end up where they started. And you definitely get that with Monza, like, literally in the same room where the story started, except with a role reversal.
Yep. Yeah, he likes to do that.
Yeah.
And I mean, poor Friendly wanted to end up where he started, but
Yeah.
couldn't go back to safety like he wanted to.
Poor Friendly.
Poor guy.
I loved Friendly. He was great.
Just another very unique character that Abercrombie has written.
He's so funny.
I think I told you about it before you got to it, but when he demands that they apologize to his dice. Like, you've gone too far.
Yeah. Yeah. It's funny because I know we're talking about like lack of ace representation in books. I feel like Friendly is definitely asexual.
Yeah. I mean, the only thing that excited him was counting the thrusts, because counting is really the only thing.
Yeah.
And he does get, I mean, I don't know if it is asexual, because like he does get sexually aroused by day counting. He's just I mean, different.
I feel like he's on the ace spectrum.
He's on many spectrums.
He is on many spectrums.
He's a unique individual.
He is, but I really enjoyed him. I just thought like his sort of
I enjoy
view of the world was really interesting.
The buddy cop juxtaposition of opposites that is Casca and Friendly.
Yeah.
And that's another thing that's fun, like because Abercrombie likes to have chapters that echo each other. He likes to have chapters that like begin and end in the same place.
Yeah.
He likes to do stuff like that. So like having the mirrored internal monologues of Friendly and Casca, where like Friendly or like Casca finds Friendly's silence, like his like complete confident silence, relaxing and therapeutic and very soothing to be around, and he just enjoys how he's like, he just has the courage to say nothing at all and like not care what anyone thinks. And then Friendly loves Casca talking all the time, and he's like, he has the courage to just talk and say anything and not care what anyone thinks. Like they both think the same thing about each other, but like the exact opposite thing.
Yeah.
So they both find like that they're drawn to each other, not, in a sexual or romantic way, just that like they balance each other out in a way that they both deeply appreciate.
I love it. I do think what he does with that, what you're talking about, is really interesting. And the one that really stood out in this book, where I was listening to the audiobook and then I was like, wait. So I went back and read it because I had like taken a break from
you haven't even said what it is, but I'm like 99% sure. That's why I'm nodding, because I know exactly what you're talking about.
It's the sex scene.
Yeah. So like, I think I mentioned this, I don't know, I think it was in our podcast talking about the First Law trilogy, but anyway, I've mentioned it before, and definitely in my like overview about how there's certain things that he's like learns from his mistakes, and then he like improves on the things that he does well, so that by the time you get to the new trilogy, he's kind of like perfected all of his like Olympic moves to where they're all like gold level performance. And so then like in my overview video where I was being non-spoiler, I was like, that thing he does where like he starts a chapter where the previous one ended, or like mirrors them or whatever. And I was like, I guess that sounds like any book, because it sounds like basically you could describe any chapter as starting that way. But I was like, but if you've read the books, you know exactly what I'm talking about, because he starts doing it in Best Served Cold with that. And by the time you get to the new trilogy, he's taken that, let's call it an Olympic move. And he's like, it is the most precision execution of that, because he's like taken that and like really perfected that thing.
It's so impressive, because it's like, so for anybody who hasn't read it, who's in the spoiler section, it's like a sex scene that keeps switching perspectives between Monza and Shivers, and because they had sex before, you just assume that it's each of their perspectives sleeping together, and then you slowly realize, oh, they're having sex with two different people.
Yes, indeed.
Oh man, it was really
very well executed.
Yeah. Okay, I also have a question, because there were some things that happened that I was like, okay, so there's this whole thing.
Well, when I asked you how you were doing with Shivers, it was pre loss of eye, so he's quite a different person after that. But I don't think that's what you're about to talk about. So what were you about to say?
I was going to talk about Shanked, because what's interesting about it, and I'm not sure that I pieced this together correctly, but like, tell me if I'm wrong. I mean, he, number one, is like quite a character, like eats people. That was a creepy scene, speaking of which, when he kills the woman and then like cuts off her leg.
I mean, I don't know that like in Best Served Cold that it's the most like, like there's a lot of stuff that happens in it that's like quite.
No, but that scene like really this isn't what I was gonna say, but like that scene did stand out to me, where I was like, that's so disturbing. I'm like, oh, and it'll be a nice rump steak seared on the, and I'm like, ew, no.
But anyway. I mean, he's an eater, and we know an eater.
Yeah, he is. Okay, but there's a scene later on where he goes to a house where presumably his love interest and the children they have together live, right? And the woman, I think, is is it Vitari?
Yeah, Shiloh Vitari.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. But, well, okay. I mean, number one, I have questions about who was watching the children while they were both on these escapades. But number two.
I mean, we knew she had children from the first Law trilogy because Glocta uses that against her.
That's true.
He's like, he guesses that where her children escaped. He doesn't know for a fact, but he's like, okay, where would her children, like, which exit would they have used and when would they have gone? He's like, I'm guessing they went, yesterday, and I'm guessing they would have gone through this gate. So he's like, oh, we got them as they were going through this gate. And she's like, oh my God, he's got them. Because he's like, yep, guess right.
That's right. I had forgotten. Yeah, I think I noticed early on that that's who she was, but then I forgot. So I forgot that was who she was. But yeah, so there's that. But like, she was the one who slept with Shivers and then tried to convince him to kill.
No.
Yes.
In Best Served Cold? No. That was what's her name? Ida from. She was the like noble lady that Glocta spared her life when they were in.
But he said Vitari in the scene.
He might have been talking about her, but that's not who he was sleeping with.
Carlotte
Den Eider.
Oh.
Shiloh Vitari, Carlotte Den Eider. She's the noble woman that like Glocta was like, I really shouldn't have spared her life. Why was I merciful? That was so dumb of me.
Okay.
Because then she shows up later and is like causing him a pain in the ass.
I was very confused.
And then she's the one that's like currently on Glocta's orders sleeping with Orso's son. And that's why they get her to like arrange the Cardati's House of Ledger thing.
Okay. This was very confusing. There were a lot of moving pieces and people. So I was like, wait, is that her or what? Okay. That makes more sense. Yeah. Okay. Because I was like, all these motivations don't make sense. What's happening? Okay. That
makes more sense now.
Makes a lot more sense now. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, the only one that, as far as we know that Shiloh slept with is Shanked. And then we know that Morveer makes them like comment about something about her. And she's like, I'd already told you before that I forget. She's like, I'd rather sleep with a rat or something. And she says something very like mean. And he's like, you've made your position quite clear. I will not be renewing any overtures of that sort. Like, you don't have to remind me that you're repulsed by me. Because like Morveer also like in his mind is thinking about, because she's so like mean to him, it reminds him of his mother. And that's what like turns him on about it.
Yeah.
She's like mean and abusive, just like his mother.
Yeah, except he also poisoned his mother.
He also adored his mother, and like no woman is ever fit to like fill her shoes.
Right. He's got some issues.
Don't they all?
Yeah. They do.
Show me a First Law character that doesn't need therapy.
Accurate. Okay, so Shanked is, though, like, I feel like Shanked is probably going to show up again because it seems like he's on one side of this three-sided war that's happening.
Yeah, I mean, he is his own side, I guess.
Yeah.
Because he doesn't, he's not, when you say a side, like, we have, like, Baez and Crew, Valent and Balk and everyone. Right. And then you have, like, the Gurkish and, like, their, Khalul. But, like, Shanked is just, he's a one-man operation. He's the Lone Ranger. He's on his own.
It is interesting because you end up having like all three of them trying to sort of have Monza on their side at the end of the book.
Well, Monza becomes, I don't know, like a chess piece they're all fighting over.
Right.
And like, she's not that anyone really wants her, but like, because they think the other one wants her, then it makes her interesting. Like Shanked even says originally, I was going to kill you. Mm-hmm. And then it seemed to me that keeping you alive would serve me better.
Yeah. So, like, what is Shanked's endgame, though?
Just to hurt Baez. In every opportunity. Like, if an investor is cold, he makes it pretty clear that, like, that's what he's trying to do.
Yeah.
Basically, so the political situation, right, is that they want to get Talons to be, like, part of the Union. Glocta is, or King Giselle, but we know it's Glocta through Baez.
The cripple.
Or, like, Baez through Glocta.
That's who they're always referencing.
Yeah, because, like, Baez is truly in charge. So, but, like, Glocta making this happen is because Baez wants it. So like Orso is very friendly with him. He's married his daughter to King Giselle. They're getting very cozy. This is about to happen. So it's clear that Baez wants this. And so since Monza was working for Orso and very successfully giving him everything he needed because she was good at her job, then Shanked was like, well, I don't want this to happen purely because Baez wants this to happen, to have like Tyria to become part of the Union. And so originally he wants to kill Monza. But then when Orso turns on his own henchman, Manza, and kills her. And now she wants to kill Orso, which is really, he was trying to hurt Orso and thought he'd kill Manza that way.
Yeah.
He was like, well, if you want to hurt Orso, well, now you are on my team. So now I want to save your life.
Right. It's just interesting because it's like she's trying to do revenge and then other people are trying to do revenge through her.
There's a very nested revenging going on.
There is indeed.
Sometimes they're like, Casca, shouldn't you be wanting revenge on Manza? Why are you helping her with her revenge? And he's like, she's hot.
Yeah. Like, I can forgive it in a pretty woman.
And it's sort of like halfway between lust and a fatherly affection, because he did help raise her and teach her to read. He made her who she is. Like, he gave her the opportunity to like rise in the ranks. So he does feel like a protective fatherly type affection for her, but he's also like, she's also really hot. So.
Yeah. I mean, I do also feel like there's a couple of moments where I wonder if he suspects that she wasn't behind a lot of what ended up happening.
Well, he says something to along those. He's one of the people when I was thinking about like everyone else saying stuff that's contradicting Manza's view of herself.
Right.
And Casca knew Manza and Benna better than probably anybody else.
Yeah.
And he's one of the first to like say to Manza that like, it was Benna that was doing all that stuff, though, not you. Maybe that's what Benna would think. Maybe that's what Benna would want to achieve.
Yeah.
But not you. You just went along with it.
Yeah. So I do wonder if part of it is that, where he's like, okay, I also know it wasn't really your fault.
I mean, I wouldn't go so far as to say it's not your fault. She's very complicit. Like, she wasn't trying to put a stop to it. But he knows that, like, she would do anything for Benna. And he knows what Benna was like.
Yeah.
It doesn't take a genius to put that together.
Yeah. Speaking of Costa, I did not anticipate him not being dead.
But, you know,
and it's kind of funny because it was when he supposedly died, it was such this like dramatic scene of like a rose petal falling on his face and stuff. And I was like, wow, okay. And then he's not dead now.
Which is also like a funny, like echoing callback, because before the would-be death, someone else is surprised that he's not dead when he shows up. And he's like, reports of my death have often been exaggerated. And then later, when we all thought he was dead, and Manza is like, I thought you were dead. And he's like, reports of my death have been often exaggerated. You just can't kill him. He's like a cockroach.
He's great. Well, and then the whole thing of him, like, I suspected he wasn't actually drinking alcohol in his flask. I just figured it was like water or something, but the fact that it was like goat's milk, but then once what's his name was dead, he just went right back to drinking alcohol again. It's like it was just purely to prove that he could.
Slash, you know, when you have a poisoner that hates you, it's a good idea. Casca likes to act, you know, that's why he's also kind of like Jack Sparrow. You're like, he's crazy and seems kind of dumb and self-destructive, but he also kind of has a plan always.
Yep. Okay, the other thing that I just got such a kick out of was the crown poisoning thing. Because I was just like, after he has like fail after fail after
Which
fail.
I love the montage of failures of Morveer. All the times he's tried to poison her and failed
like,
spectacularly.
Which it's funny too, like the one where he was like, yeah, he put a thorn in this dress, and if Day was still alive, she would have been able to tell him it was the wrong size for their victim. But alas, some random woman who got a copy died instead. I don't know. That was funny. But then by happenstance, he ends up accidentally locked in a room with the crown and is like, aha! Like, here's what I'm gonna do. I was like,
which in theory, I mean, again, that actually could have worked, except she's got a glove, so you killed literally everyone except her.
Yeah.
Once again.
Yeah. Well, although they did want him to kill everybody else too. Orzo did, which he was freaked out by, but
he mostly wanted Manza dead.
He mostly wanted Manza dead.
That's the one he didn't kill.
Yep. But it was Orzo's fault for having her hand broken, I guess. So
yeah. Or for killing her brother,
or for killing her brother. A lot of reasons. Yeah. You know. Yeah.
We haven't talked about Shivers at all.
No, we only have a little bit.
I mean, I brought it up and then was like, but that's not what you were going to talk about. So we'll circle back.
I mean, we've talked about him in passing, but yeah, Shivers is an interesting character, I think, because he wants
I mean, it's
to
almost
do
as
good.
much his book as it is Manza's.
Yeah. he wants to be a better person, you know, not have this
Choose a
level of
better
violence,
path.
choose a better path, but
Which
he
Monza
just
makes fun of until she misses it when it's gone.
right.
She was like, dang it, I kind of liked it when you were a dumb optimist.
Yeah.
What happened to that?
Mhm. And he's like,
It's like, oh, I decided I agree with you. You've convinced me. She's like, dang it.
which is kind of sad for him.
Well, I mean, I definitely feel like Shiver's character arc, and particularly his arc in this book, is in conversation with Logan Nine Fingers and the Bloody Nine.
Yeah.
Because like Logan is the end of that path, what that looks like, and Shivers is the beginning and how you end up there.
Yeah. Well, and wasn't there, I feel like there was a moment where he kind of went wild in battle at one point, almost like Logan.
Yeah. There's a moment where like he's like the voice of the Bloody Nine, only it was coming from his own lips.
Right.
Like he doesn't have the like full on blackout mode like
Mm-hmm.
a certain Mr. Nine Fingers,
Right.
but he's definitely following in the footsteps of his once nemesis.
Yeah.
And they literally have him play the Bloody Nine in a mock battle. Like it's not very subtle.
No. Which ends up turning into a real battle where he has
Which is yet another revenge story, just within the other revenges.
Well, there's so many revenge arcs in this book. Like everybody's trying to get revenge, and just a lot of people end up dying.
Which I think is another like commentary on like Monza's like, you know, because it's your revenge and it's like this earth-shattering thing, and everyone's like, well, in the first place, where do you get off? And also like everybody's got a grudge, everybody's got a grievance. Like it's literally all, especially in a world of violence. Whoever you killed was someone's brother, was someone's father, was someone's mother, was someone's sister.
Yep.
And someone's after you, like no matter, which is kind of why Shivers wanted to choose a better path, because like any life of violence just sows the seeds of further violence. But like also you have to be realistic, as Logan would say, and in the world they live in, it's not realistic to try to avoid that path.
Yeah. I do think it's interesting too, the parallels between, you know, both of them wanted revenge for a brother who died, who was kind of awful.
Yeah, but one of them recognized it and the other didn't.
And the other didn't, at least at the beginning. Although she has a moment later on where she's like, it's like she says something to the effect of like, I used to love him or something. It seems like she's recognizing that she like doesn't love her brother anymore.
I don't remember the line you're talking about, but I mean, she does have a few moments along the way, and especially towards the end, where she's not completely in denial about who he was, but she's also constantly justifying it, because she's like, well, he had to be this way, and he was a sensitive person, so pointing out to him what he had done like would serve no purpose, so I took care of it. He's sickly, and he's, you know, he couldn't handle it. I had to do it. I know how he is, and I hate that he's like that, but I know that that's how he is, and it's my job to fix it for him. Like she's thinking that all the time.
I wish I had bookmarked it, because there was a line, I don't like late in the book, where she said something like, I used to love him, or something like that.
I think she also, I mean, I don't know if this is the line you're thinking of, but I remember a moment where she's kind of thinking about the sweet boy that he was when they were children, and how she forgave a lot of what he was along the way, because she was always protecting and loving him. And like he became someone quite different from who he was when they were children. And that was like the boy that she loved. And that's why she always protected him.
Yeah. I don't know if that was it or not. I'll have to, if I ever reread it, I'll have to keep an eye out. But
what do you mean if? This is the annual thing, Bethany. You're on the train now.
No.
The train loops. It doesn't ever end. It just goes in a circle.
I'm going to get off. No.
It's just like his books where the characters end where they began. Well, when you end The Wisdom of Crowds, you actually end at the beginning of the blade
itself. Oh, no. I'm going to hop off that train probably. But yeah, but it is interesting, right? They both have brothers who are kind of awful, who they were seeking revenge for.
That's
she
commits
and follows through, even though she questions it, she still does it. He doesn't.
But I mean, that's kind of why she hires him too, because he's like, I wanted revenge for like the guy that killed my brother. Or no, she says it to him, that's what she wants, because he doesn't really want to work for her,
right?
Because he's trying to be a better man, and she's like, I want revenge for my brother's killer, and he's like, dang it, that's like exactly the thing that would get me to agree to this. Okay.
It's like, yeah, I did too, and I had a chance and I didn't take it.
I kind of laughed when you said this, because I was like, it's the first of two. When you were like, oh, he gets a makeover, and I was like, he's gonna get another makeover, a very different kind of makeover later in the book. So it's funny that he gets a glow up, and then he turns into a monster.
Yeah. Also, it's so shallow of Monza to suddenly be like, no, I'm not
Well,
into you anymore.
I mean, it's partly shallow because it's not shallow. It is, but it's also the fact that every time she looks at him, she also knows that it's her fault.
Yeah.
And she does feel guilty about it, and she
Yeah.
knows that he blames her. So
Yeah.
it's like, I mean, yes, she does feel physically disgusted by it because, I mean, in fairness, who wouldn't be? Like, they describe it, and it's pretty gross and horrifying. You know, I kind of get it, but it's not just that, because he's like, he literally says it should have been you.
Yeah.
So like that, how do you get over like that in a relationship that was already not exactly the best relationship? Like they were never really on the same page.
Yeah.
And then that happens.
Yeah.
You know, there's no coming back from that.
I guess I just also sort of feel like, well, I mean, that I think is true, but in terms of the shallow piece of it, I want to be like, lady, you have the most scars.
But I mean, she recognizes her own hypocrisy on that. Like when she thinks about it, she's like, I mean, I don't have any right, but like, it's gross. It's just gross. And then, I mean, the way they describe too, like, so after it heals and he gets his fake eye, and the way that it's like too big, and the way that it like turns the wrong way all the time, you can see why she'd be like, oh, I'm like,
I want to be like, you just get an eye patch. Like just rock an eye patch. Like, I think that would be better.
That's why I always tell people to not look up fan art of Shivers, because most fan art is post eye loss.
I could see that.
Which I guess
kind of funny though when like the iris part falls out in battle.
Yeah. And just in general, how when she's like telling him that like it's the wrong way, and he's like, oh, is it? And then he like turns it, and then she's like, yeah, it's better now, except it's like way worse. She's like, why did I say anything?
And the guy's like, it's just real. And he's like, they look like dead men's eyes. And he's like, no, in a living face.
Well, it's before that happens, when he still has the bandage on, and he's like, you know, we can do marvelous things. Don't doubt it. We might be able to totally fix this. And he takes off. He's like, okay. And he's like, does your like miraculous, like whatever, does it stretch that far? And he's like, yeah, no. Okay. Yeah. That's more than we can fix, but we've got a glass one for you.
Yeah.
Same as your old one.
Yeah. I think an eye patch would have been a better choice for Shivers.
Well, I can tell you that Shivers will never choose the eye patch.
Great.
That's kind of its signature look now.
Oh, good.
Well, it does strike fear into the hearts of your enemies.
I mean, that's true. Fair point.
He goes on quite an arc.
He does. So that is Best Served Cold.
Barely scratching the surface of Best Served Cold.
But we've been doing it for like a while. So yeah, I mean, I really liked this one. I feel like I'm going to hate the next book. So we'll see.
I don't think
I'm going to be bored. I think I'll be bored.
Yeah. But again, it'll help. You'll have the benefit that I didn't, of knowing what it is going into it. Because if you don't know, then you're like, you're like, excuse me?
Yeah, I'll get through it.
It's really like, it's once you know that that's what it is, and you're not looking for the plot, you're not expecting to find one, it's very liberating, and you can just enjoy the ride, because it is a very, very good ride. Because just like, I mean, all of those like amazing moments that like like in Best Served Cold, this cast of characters that are all like strange and unique individuals having strange conversations that are like, you know, they're dark and funny and somehow poignantly heartfelt. The Heroes is filled with stuff like that. It just like doesn't have a plot. So I don't think you'll hate it. You'll just be like, well, there was a plot.
Good to know. So we'll be back next month to talk about the Heroes, and we'll see how it goes. But it's been fun getting to new material.
Indeed. Yeah. So would you, in your rankings, now that you've read the trilogy and this, did you like this better than the trilogy, or the same, or not as much?
Well, I also ranked the trilogy books differently.
I mean, just by being like, this is new. So then like, do you think the trilogy as a whole is better, or did you think this was better? And also,
I think the trilogy is still better. I mean, they're very different though.
Well, and I think, I mean, I'll want to ask you this like as kind of several times throughout, but since like people ask where to start, and can you start at not the blade itself? Like I say always chronological order is the best, but that like Best Served Cold is an acceptable starting point if you want to try on his style, and then go back and read the blade itself, and then keep going chronologically after that. But I don't know if you think that this is a better starting point, or if you also would say, no, definitely read the blade itself before you ever touch Best Served Cold.
I don't know. I mean, I could see an argument for both directions. Like on the one hand, like we've said, if you've read the trilogy first, you're going to get more out of Best Served Cold. However, in Best Served Cold, he's a better writer. than in the Blade itself.
Well,
And
pacing wise, I think
well, pacing wise, but like other
character
stuff.
work is on par.
Yeah, but in terms of like pacing and like the way the plot proceeds and everything, like this is just a much tighter book. So I think, especially if you're somebody who gets bogged down in slow books, if you don't see where it's going, I would actually start with Best Served Cold. I think this would be a better starting point for someone like that, because it's just and like you can read it and you don't have to read anything else if you don't want to. Like it can be read as a standalone. So I actually
It
think
literally is a standalone.
right, yeah. So I actually do think that this might be a better starting point for most, not for everybody, but I think for most people, this actually might be a better starting point than
I definitely
the
wouldn't
Blade
say
itself.
most people,
I
but
mean,
because
well,
I can
you're
tell you
also
that.
in okay, you're also in like a very specific sort
But I
of
can also, but
SFF
I can tell
bubble.
you that for a lot of people do not like when I say that this was my favorite, and it isn't
Yeah.
anymore, but when it was for a long time, most people don't agree with that. A lot of people don't like this one very much, and they don't like Monza. They don't
That's
like
so
the
interesting.
plot of it. They
Man.
think it's boring. So
Really?
like,
That's so interesting.
so
I
I can
like
tell
it.
you that when you
I
say for
mean,
most people,
okay.
like I could see for certain
All
readers,
right.
certainly, like is
Okay.
again, if like the pacing is going to be a
Yeah.
problem for sure. That's why I always say like if you don't want to commit to a trilogy, if you just kind of want to like try on his style, I think that this is
Yeah.
of the standalones the one that works best. That like actually really like you can read the heroes as a standalone. It is a standalone, but like Best Served Cold really works as like a I can pick this up, sink my teeth into this revenge story, and see what his writing is like.
Yes.
And then go back and read his other stuff better than the
Yeah.
others. So like if you did want a taster, like this would be the one.
Yeah. No, I agree. I also actually think it could be an interesting thing to read this first and then go back and see how like Giselle became king.
I was
Because
about to
like you
say,
see
like,
a
I know we're
you
trying to
know,
wrap this up, but like we didn't talk about the Giselle cameo,
we
which is
did
one of
it.
my favorite things.
That was so good, that whole scene. And also how somebody's like, "Oh yeah, your wife likes women." He's like, My wife what?" Like, he's just
Because he still hadn't put that together.
no.
Oh, Giselle.
Ah, Giselle. So, I mean, I actually could see a world in which it would be really interesting to go from reading this first back to the first law and be like, "Oh, the cripple. Oh, King Giselle." Like, I actually think that could work really well. So, I do think this could be a really good
Oh,
place to start.
shivers.
Oh, shivers. Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, that's a great, like when you like read all of the books, like when you go back to the beginning again, when, not if, and you see like young kid Shivers, they're like, that's Rattleneck's son, but Rattleneck's son is dead. No, that's his other son. The little kid?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Like he's like a youngin'. And he's
Yeah.
like, I'm gonna kill Logan.
Yeah.
Like, okay. Pipe down, Tyke.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh, to go from like one-eyed monster Shivers back to kid Shivers, who's like, I'm gonna kill Logan who killed my brother. Like,
Yeah. Yeah. No, yeah, so I mean, I could see I think it just depends on what you like, but I think if the premise of this sounds appealing and if pacing is an issue for you, I think this could be a good place to start. Yeah. And then you may decide you want to read it again later, or you may not, because like there are things you get out of it having read the First Law trilogy first. But I also think that reading this first, there are things you would get out of the First Law trilogy.
well, there's also, I mean, having read all of the new trilogy too, like, because it's all connected. It's all builds on what happened before. So this third time around, it being the third time, I picked up details that are just details I missed that have nothing to do with anything that I just didn't notice. But there's also things that, like, he hadn't planned the new trilogy yet. So it's not like that, but it's just like little stuff that like he later decided to do something with, where like a name that's relatively insignificant is actually a name that you now have more reason to pay attention to, because like, you know what, that little thing that didn't mean anything, I'm going to use it. And it's just, that's why the more you read it, the more that like he's chosen to interconnect things. It's like when you study a history book and you're like, oh, and this family from like this other conflict a few generations back in the era of whatever, well, they kind of come back into political significance, whatever, they start this uprising. And so like history is always littered with those kind of like interweaving connections. So like having that, mosaic of little connections all throughout just makes it feel more lived in and real.
Yeah. Yeah, I like it. So we could talk a lot, but we're going to move into On My Radar, where we'll share recent or upcoming book releases in sci-fi, fantasy, and romance we're excited about. Books for today's episode will be released mostly between May 31st and June 13th, 2022. I think Leanna has one that's coming out later in June. But first, if you enjoy the podcast, we would appreciate if you take a moment to rate and review us so we can continue to reach more listeners. And if you're interested in getting early access to episodes and exclusive bonus content with every episode, consider supporting us on Patreon. And I guess I'll note this. Our bonus content is not the same as whatever the topic for the episode is. We have done a wide range. I think today we're going to talk about the Johnny Depp and Amber Heard trial, which should be fun.
Because there are only two topics that Leanna is capable of talking about, and those are first law
and the trial. So heads up, if you join us on Patreon, you'll have access to a whole playlist of fun bonus content. Huge thanks to all of our supporting patrons, including our world-expanding patrons, Trina and Sarah. You all make what we do possible, so thank you. I have 3 books to talk about today. 4 books. 4 books to talk about today. First up, May 31st, there are 2 books coming out that I have already read, and I loved both of them. So we have A Caribbean Heiress in Paris by Adriana Herrera. This is a historical romance following a woman from the Caribbean who is traveling to France in the late 1800s for the World Exposition and ends up meeting a man, and it's great. It's a lot of fun. It's a fantastic historical romance, and I love the fact that Adriana Herrera is doing research into the very real existence of people of color in history and then writing historical romances based on that. And so it's really, really fantastic. And then also we have Summer's Edge by Dana Melly, which this is not in one of our typical genres, but it is kind of a horror thriller, so I feel like it sort of counts. It's got a paranormal aspect to it, so I'm going to throw it in here. This is wonderful. It's a YA book that's being pitched as Rebecca Meets the Haunting of Hill House, and it's really good. It's very summery. It's got mostly, not entirely, but like queer main characters, and it follows a group of friends who are spending the summer at a house where the summer before one of their friends had died in a fire. And there's a lot of like messy relationship dynamics. There is a bisexual love triangle that's very complicated with like exes and stuff, and like ex-boyfriend who's the twin brother of the girl who died, ex-girlfriend who owns the house with her, like her parents own the house, and maybe the house is haunted. It's great. I really liked it. Leanna, if you want to share yours, and then I'll do my other 2.
My one and only.
Yeah.
Well, the wonderful author of the Blackwing Ravensmark trilogy, Ed McDonald, has a new book and a new series coming out in June called The Daughter of Red Winter. The series is the Red Winter Chronicles. And it's about a girl that can see and speak to the dead.
Yes. I'm supposed to be reading that later this month. I'm excited.
Me too.
Should be fun. June 7th, I've got a couple books coming out. First up is Wrath Goddess Sing by Maya Dean. This is interesting, drawing on ancient texts and modern archaeology to reveal the trans woman's story hidden underneath the well-known myths of the Iliad. Maya Dean's Wrath Goddess Sing weaves a compelling, pitilessly beautiful vision of Achilles' vanished world, perfect for fans of Song of Achilles and the Inheritance trilogy. So kind of an interesting idea, the idea that Achilles was a trans woman. Interesting.
Well, I mean, the text does support that. He does cross-dress.
Well,
I mean,
there you go.
He pretty like he passes as the woman when he cross-dresses in the original.
Okay, so it makes a lot of sense. So yeah, there you go. Wrath Goddess Sing. I think it's kind of a cool concept. I didn't know that. And then also coming out June 7th is 8 Weeks in Paris by S.R. Lane. This one is a romance. The thing for the book says, lost novel of belle epic Paris, the throne comes to the silver screen with an A-list cast, but will on-set drama doom the filming of this gay love story before it starts? So it's like enemies to lovers with like the actors on set for this this movie that's filming in Paris. So it looks fun. So there you go. Check those out. They will all be linked in the show notes or in the video description if you're watching us on YouTube. Again, this has been Chapter 3 Podcast. We're your hosts, Bethany and Leanna. You can follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok. And you can also find us on YouTube on our personal YouTube channels. All of that will be linked down below in the show notes or in the video description if you're watching us on YouTube. The next episode will be available in 2 weeks. I will be back with Izzy. Not quite sure what we're going to be doing, but it'll be fun and romance related. So we'll be back in a couple weeks. This episode's bonus content will be available to patrons in the next few days. Thanks for listening.